So I was prepping this week to have this podcast and trying to figure out exactly what I wanted to talk about. And I'd already kind of gone over all of my baseball picks, playoffs, division winners, award winners, all that stuff. I've talked about football, and I'm going to continue to be talking about football each and every week. I'm going over all of my individual picks, or individual thoughts, I should say, for each of the past weekend's games. And, you know, basketball is not really being played right now, so there's not much for me to go over there. So what am I going to talk about this week? And then I had a revelation. I never really went over any of the Boston Celtics offseason moves, and there have been plenty to talk about, so I am now going to give you a comprehensive coverage of each and every major offseason move that the Boston Celtics made. I'm going to give you my thoughts on them. I'm going to show you exactly what each of those moves were, and I'm not going to rank them in any particular order, but they're going to kind of be in chronological order, or at least somewhat chronological. Some of them, people that were signed to like two-way contracts or Exhibit 10 contracts, I kind of grouped together into one kind of clump each. So, those necessarily wouldn't be chronological if one guy signed in July and another guy signed 2 weeks ago to the same kind of contract. They'll still be grouped together. So hopefully you guys enjoy it, and hopefully, this makes a lot of sense, and hopefully it's a good kind of comprehensive list of all of the offseason moves that the Boston Celtics did in one fell swoop. So here we go. Let's start with a move that actually happened during the season. Not necessarily an off-season move, but something that is equally as important as any of the moves that we made over the off-season. Jrue Holiday signing a 4-year, $135 million contract extension. Now, I said at the beginning of this little segment that it would not be ranked in any kind of order in terms of prioritization or in terms of, which one I liked better. It's somewhat in chronological order, but not really. And so this one being first is actually a bit misleading, because this is actually the move that I liked the least. And it's not because I don't like Jrue Holiday at all. In fact, I love this move, just like I love the rest of these. The issue I have with it is that out of all of the contracts that the Celtics have kind of gone through this offseason, this one is the one that I look at and I think it will age the worst. Now, of course, with salaries kind of booming over the next handful of years because of the new CBA and the new TV contract, this may not look as bad in 4 years as what it looks in terms of annual value right now. But also, by the time Jrue Holiday gets to the end of this contract, he will be somewhere around 38 years old, I believe. Now, there are some players who are playing at 38 years old. Obviously, Al Horford is one of those players. LeBron James is another one of those players. But for the most part, by the time you are 38, your playing days are either over or they're about to come to an end. And certainly your prime is long gone for the vast majority of players. And Jrue Holiday relies a lot on his pure athleticism due to his defensive versatility. If he does not have his ability to hop, if he does not have his quickness in order to stay in front of point guards and wings, if he does not have his strength left, then unfortunately he's gonna be mostly useless as a player. Now, obviously, he can still spot up, shoot, and stuff like that. That stuff's never gonna go away, and I'm sure he will continue to get better at those things. And his intelligence and his eye for the game and his ability to set up his teammates will probably still be there. But at the same time, you're going to be paying $30-something million to a guy who may not be super valuable by the end of this contract, and he may not even be on the team by the end of this contract. He may get traded before that. So as much as I absolutely love this deal, and it was absolutely necessary for the Boston Celtics to re-sign Jrue Holiday, and I am very happy that they re-signed Jrue Holiday, I do not want to kind of look around or look past the thought that this contract may not age very well. And that's not something that I can say for a lot of other contracts on the Boston Celtics right now. Obviously, Jaylen Brown's contract was looked at as a disaster at first by a lot of people, including myself. But now, given the fact that he should have made an All-NBA team but did not last year, won Finals MVP, and won Eastern Conference Finals MVP. It's looking like he is super important, and it looks like he is worth every single penny of that contract. So we'll see how this one actually winds up aging, but right now, it just gives me a little bit of pause. Those last few years on that contract, or that last year or two, might not be great. The NBA offseason always starts with the NBA draft, and so now I am going to turn my attention to Baylor Scheierman and Anton Watson, the two draft picks of the Boston Celtics. Baylor Scheierman out of Creighton. He was a fourth or maybe even fifth year college player. He is typically a 2. He averaged about 20 points per game and about 4.5 assists per game in college, as well as around 8 rebounds out of the shooting guard position in college. So this is a guy who put up quite a bit of stats at Creighton. This is an NBA ready guy. Everybody's kind of already talked about Baylor Scheierman at this point. I understand I'm very, very late to the game, but again, I want to give a big comprehensive coverage of all the offseason moves so that everybody can just kind of go back to this video whenever they're wanting to look over all of it, and you could just have it all in one nice place instead of hopping between a whole bunch of videos from a whole bunch of people. So, again, from Creighton, he's a lefty shooter. That is his main kind of skill set, is his offensive ability to score and to shoot. He was about a 38 to 40% three-point shooter in college, and the Celtics are obviously hoping that he will translate that exact game to the pros. Now, he also is a good off-ball scorer as well. He is a good screen setter. He has a lot of skills that the Celtics like. Where he lacks is athleticism and defensive versatility. He was not a good defender in college, and he is not a prime athlete. He's not a guy that's going to out-quick you, out-jump you, etc. But again, this is a guy that's NBA ready, very similar to what a Sam Hauser is going to be able to give you. And so this is a guy that can come off the bench if there's any kind of injuries, especially if there is an injury to somebody like Sam Hauser, who can come off the bench and do a lot of the same things that Sam Hauser can do, albeit with a little bit of decrease in actual skill level and most likely efficiency as well. But this is a great pick for the Celtics. Unfortunately, with his contract and the way the second apron works, they are not just paying him the, $2 million or whatever he ends up getting paid, $3 million this year. They are also paying a 3 to 4 times tax on that contract, which means they're actually paying roughly $10 to $12 million to have him on the roster in total money, both to the player and to the NBA offices, obviously with the second apron penalties and being in tax and all that stuff. So we'll see how this ends up working out, but he is not on a two-way contract. Just to clarify, he is not on a two-way contract, so that means that he will either have to be, sent down to the G League just on his own and then called up, whenever the Celtics see fit, or he will have to remain on the roster. He does not have a training camp deal. He does not have an Exhibit 10. He does not have a two-way contract. So there are no distinctions on his contract as to where he will be. He will have to earn his roster spot. It seems pretty likely that he will have that roster spot just because somebody like Svi Mykhailiuk is not coming back. He will probably take that Svi Mykhailiuk spot on the roster. But we will see how it goes as the season rolls along. And now Anton Watson out of Gonzaga, another 4-year college player, another guy who is a little bit more NBA ready. He's not as young. I think he's around 22 years old, maybe 21. Not obviously that old, clearly. I mean, I'm 27, significantly younger than me. But at the same time, another guy who, he's not a one and done. He's not, he's not 19 years old or 18 years old or 17 years old or something like that. He's a guy who's a little bit more seasoned. Anton Watson, right about the opposite kind of player that Baylor Scheierman is. He's not necessarily an offensive, weapon per se, although he has his strengths on that end. He is defensively very, very versatile. A lot of comps in the draft. I don't know if it was just because he was drafted by the Celtics or if this is actually how people looked at him. A lot of people looked at him in very similar ways to Al Horford, or perhaps Xavier Tillman, a guy that's typically going to play the center position, perhaps the power forward position, and is very, very versatile. You saw him guarding Jaime Jaquez quite a bit in the summer league, and doing a pretty good job on him as well. And obviously Jaime Jaquez is a guy who in a lot of other years would have won Rookie of the Year. He is a clear NBA ready player. He was the second best player on the Heat in the playoffs without Jimmy Butler and Terry Rozier and the like. So this is an NBA caliber guy. This is a guy that is no slouch in terms of his NBA talent, and Anton Watson was holding his own on the defensive end, blocking him a couple of times, locking him up defensively at times. So again, Watson, very versatile defensively. He can most likely guard 2 through 5. Maybe he can step out onto a 1 every once in a while, but I wouldn't necessarily love that. But he's a guy that Brad Stevens and Joe Mazzulla are going to be able to use defensively to switch a lot. Obviously, we know the Celtics like to switch a lot on defense, and this is a guy who can switch very, very often and guard any of those 2 through 5 positions, and he will hold his own just fine. Now, his weaknesses. Offensively, he doesn't have much game to him. He's a little bit better of a shooter than I think he gives himself credit for. And Joe Mazzulla and Brad Stevens have come out and said that they actually hope that Anton Watson lets it fly a little bit more than he did in college. He shot 40% from 3 in college, but he only shot it about 1 to 1.5 times a game from 3. So it's not like he was, chucking it up 4 or 5 times or 7 to 10 times like Baylor Shireman was per game. He was only doing it every once in a while. So he's not super versatile on offense, and he's not the best ball handler or passer either. So, this is a guy who's taken it 54th overall. He's not going to be an absolute stud, but he is on a 2-way contract, and so he's a guy that can go down to Maine, or up to Maine, I guess, and, develop and hopefully kind of get confidence in his offensive ability. If he can, this is a guy that actually can help the Celtics not only this year, but in the years to come, because of that defensive versatility that I just talked about. I think the Celtics did pretty well in the draft. I'm happy that they got 2 guys that can actually step up and help if there are injuries right now. But what do you guys think? Did the Celtics do good in the draft? Let me know in the comments. This is the first of a kind of grouping of signings that all happened. This one all happened in a very short time frame. The Boston Celtics re-signing Neemias Queta, Xavier Tillman, and Luke Cornett, all to minimum contracts. Now, this is huge. Now, signing minimum contract guys is not typically something that I would sit here and go, oh my goodness, that's crazy. But in this case, it was huge because there was no guarantee that even 2 of these players were going to come back and play for the Celtics, because not all of them really played a big role on the Celtics this year. Neemias Queta was getting a lot of looks from a lot of teams in the league, hoping that he would not re-sign with the Celtics, because a lot of teams see him as a backup big that can actually help them out and play 15 to 20 minutes a game for them. And he chose to re-sign with the Celtics. Now, in terms of Luke Cornett, this is a guy who signed a 1-year contract, whereas I believe, unless I'm mistaken, I could be mistaken, I think Neemias Queta and Xavier Tillman both signed a 2-year contract. I know Xavier Tillman signed a 2-year. I'm not 100% positive on Neemias Queta. Actually, you know what? Let me check that real quick. Okay, so Neemias Queta actually signed a 3-year contract. I was not aware of that, so look at that. I learned something new today. Regardless, obviously, Luke Cornett signing a 1-year minimum contract to come back. I'm happy that Luke Cornett came back. I gave him a lot of crap around the time of the finals, and I was just begging that he would not see the floor, but it has nothing to do with him as a player necessarily, and more had to do with the matchups. But regardless, I love the fact that all 3 of these guys re-signed, especially Xavier Tillman. I loved Xavier Tillman. I think that he is one of the most underappreciated players in the NBA. I think he can actually play offense a little bit better than most people kind of give him credit for. He had a really bad shooting year last year, but he showed some kind of flashes of that still being there in his game last year. He made 3-pointers for the Celtics when it counted. I don't know exactly what his percentages were for the Celtics. I'm sure they weren't that great, but this is a guy that was still learning the system, and now he has a full offseason to kind of go in there, and I would love to see Xavier Tillman be the main backup big off of the bench. Now, obviously, Al Horford is going to be starting the year as the starting center, most likely, obviously, as long as he stays healthy, as long as Kristaps Porzingis is out. And I would love to see Xavier Tillman be the guy that comes off the bench first. As much as I love Neemias Queta and as much as I love Luke Cornett, I think Xavier Tillman fits this team better. I think he is a better defender than both of those guys. I think he is a better perimeter defender specifically than both of those other guys. I think he has more offensive versatility and more defensive versatility. I just think he is the best player of the three, so I'd like to see him be the main guy off the bench. So all three of these guys coming back means that we will have plenty of big man depth if there's another injury, if we need to rest Al Horford on back-to-backs, whatever the case may be. I'm really excited that all three of these guys came back, and I think this is one of the most pivotal moves, or I guess three moves in this case, of the offseason. All right, folks, now we are starting to get into the meat and potatoes. Derek White signing a 4-year, $118 million contract extension with the Boston Celtics. It was one of the first moves in free agency that we ended up making, and it was arguably the most important. Yes, I said it. Now, Derek White, he is, by all accounts, by many accounts, the most important and best role player in the entire league. And it's easy to see why. This is a guy that is always up there in plus minus. His counting stats are great, but he goes far beyond the counting stats in the stat sheet. He is a guy that helps space the floor. He helps calm the team's nerves. He hits big shots. He can guard 1 through 5. Yes, I literally mean 1 through 5. He might be only 6'2" or 6'4" or whatever he is, but we saw him blocking Derek Lively in the NBA Finals. We saw him locking up Kyrie Irving in the NBA Finals. This man can guard 1 through 5. It does not matter where you put him. He is a guy that can do everything for you. Now, again, I'm so intrigued to see how much he improves even this offseason. This is a guy that seems to improve leaps and bounds each and every offseason. I don't know how much better Derek White can get, but I'm excited to see how much better he can get. So this was one of my favorite, if not my very favorite moves of the entire offseason, and Derek White is going to be a Celtic for a very long time, and I could not be more excited about it. Oh my goodness. I got a big one, and the Celtics got a big one. Jason Tatum. And by the way, when I say big one, I mean literally the biggest one, as in the biggest, largest, most expensive NBA contract in history. Jason Tatum, 5 years, $314 million contract extension. This was the big one, the biggest one. However you want to put it, this was it. Without this deal, all the other moves that the Celtics could possibly make would have been for naught. Because if Jason Tatum were to have chosen to leave in the offseason, it would not have mattered the rest of the team. We would not be championship contenders. But Brad Stevens made sure he locked up first team All-NBA, MVP, top 5 MVP candidate pretty much every single year, best player on the team, almost finals MVP, whatever other superlatives you want to put on there. The man, the guy, Jason Tatum, to the largest, I will re-emphasize, the largest NBA contract in history. Only barely edging out his teammate Jaylen Brown's contract extension from last year. And Jason Tatum deserves every penny. And I'm very, very happy to see him stick around in Boston for the foreseeable future. He's only 19 years old, as they say. Obviously he's 26 now. But we will have him for the entirety of his prime. And I'm so excited to just continue to watch Jason Tatum play for the Boston Celtics each and every season. I almost feel bad kind of following that move up with some smaller moves that may seem inconsequential by comparison. But these are actually good moves that I do want to talk about. So a couple of two-way contracts that I want to discuss here. J.D. Davison from Alabama and Drew Peterson, both signing two-way contracts at some point in the offseason. Now, I don't honestly know much about Drew Peterson. He was on the roster for a little bit last year by the end of the season, but I just don't know a whole lot about him. So unfortunately, Mr. Peterson, no offense to you or anybody else that has followed your journey, there's just not much for me to talk about here. You were on a two-way contract last year. You're on a two-way contract this year. It all makes sense to me. But J.D. Davison is a guy that I was not sure was going to come back to the Boston Celtics. He was a free agent, and certainly there was probably temptation for him around the league to go and be a backup point guard somewhere. He shows flashes of his ability to run an offense, to score, to shoot, to do everything that you guys would want in a point guard, and especially his passing game has significantly improved. He is a guy that helps lead that main Celtics team almost to a G League championship this year, coming up a little bit short, but this is a guy that I did not know was going to come back, and I'm very, very happy to see him back. He will probably have the same role that he did last year, spend a lot of time in Maine, spend some time up on the main roster, and come in garbage time. That's basically what it's going to be for both these guys, quite frankly, and so happy to see both of these mainstay Celtic G Leaguers back with the team in 2025. This is a move that happened a little bit later on in the offseason, but certainly, as they say, better late than never. Sam Hauser signing a 4-year, $45 million contract extension to stick around with the Celtics. Now, I should have said this with the Derek White contract, and I did not, so I'm going to say it here. Just like the Derek White contract, this Sam Hauser contract does not kick in until the 2025-2026 season. The reason for that, at least in the case of Sam Hauser, is because the Celtics had a team option of right around, I think, $2.8 million or something like that. $3 million, we'll say, just for the sake of simplicity. And they picked up that option for the 2024-2025 season, which obviously we are in right now. So that 4-year, $45 million extension does not kick in until after that team option is over. So in the case of Sam Hauser, he is still actually, for the 2024-2025 season, only making $3 million to be one of the most important players off of the bench. Now, with Derek White, it's not as egregious of a difference, although it's actually very similar in terms of actual annual value difference. So he was going to be making around $20 million. This was the last season of his contract, of his current contract with the Boston Celtics. This year, he's going to be making slightly over $20 million. Now, next year, his contract extension kicks in, and he will be making slightly over $28 million. So it is actually kind of a similar jump of around $8 million for both players. But obviously, in terms of percentage, Sam Hauser gets a humongous raise. So good for both of those guys. But I did just want to clarify that before I continued. But this was a super important one, and this is one that was not a guarantee. It's certainly, especially with the drafting of Baylor Shireman from Creighton, like I spoke about earlier, this was not a guarantee. This could easily have turned into Sam Hauser having his option picked up for this year while Baylor Shireman had a year to kind of develop, and then they replace him with a cheaper option in Baylor Shireman over the next few years after the season. But they chose not to do that, at least on the surface. Of course, there's always trades. There's always, Sam Hauser doesn't work out and he gets released. You just never know what could happen. But for right now, the Celtics have extended Sam Hauser. Now, I don't think any of those things are going to happen. I would love to see Sam Hauser stick around for the entirety of his contract, especially given the fact that the cap is going to be jumping quite a bit up over the next few years. At least that's what analysts are projecting. And so this $10 million a year is going to be like $3 million a year, we're hoping, by the end of this. So this is one of my favorite moves of the offseason. Happy to see Sam Hauser back. And more importantly, happy to see Sam Hauser get a bag, because he certainly came out there and earned it, and he certainly deserves it. This is a guy that was completely undrafted, made his own way, made his way onto the team, and has now carved out a super important role. And guess what? This is a guy that showed quite a bit of defensive ability towards the end of last season. He significantly improved in that area because he was a defensive liability his first full season in Boston. But last year, towards the beginning of the year, he was okay. By the end of the year, you saw it in the finals, he was doing a tremendous job guarding Luka Doncic. Now, I'm not expecting Sam Hauser to lock up all the best players on the other team all the time. Of course not. But this is a guy who can mostly hold his own on defense. And as long as Sam Hauser can do that, he'll continue to rebound and continue to finish at the rim and not just be a straight up three-point shooter. This is a guy that could actually score 12 to even 15 points per game if given enough role and given enough playing time. And so love this signing for the Celtics. I think it's a great value down the road. Another small grouping here that I want to get into, the Boston Celtics signing Ron Harper Jr. and Tristan Enaruna to Exhibit 10 deals. Let's talk about Ron Harper Jr. I am not 100% familiar with Ron Harper Jr.'s game, but I am obviously familiar with his dad's game, and if it's anything like his dad, he will be just fine. He had a great summer league, and so happy to see him kind of getting a training camp Exhibit 10 deal, and, maybe he could prove himself. The only issue for me with Ron Harper is he is a point guard, and of course the Celtics have so much point guard depth already with Drew Holiday, with Derek White, with Peyton Pritchard, with Jaden Springer, and with J.D. Davison. I don't see much of a path for him to really make the team. I would much rather see him go elsewhere and get some more playing time, but, maybe it works out and he ends up sticking around and just being in the G League or something like that, and then he kind of has to start over and everything next year. And Tristan Enaruna, this is a guy that the Celtics picked up as an undrafted free agent right after the draft this year, and he is from Cleveland State, so a pretty small college, but this is a guy who's actually quite a good athlete, and, again, another guy that can kind of do a little bit of everything on the court. He's not a supreme offensive player or anything like that, but he's a guy who's reasonably versatile on defense and a guy that can hold his own on both ends of the floor for sure. Had a decent summer league. The Celtics, honestly, as a whole, didn't play great in the summer league, which is a little bit unusual. Usually the Celtics play quite well in the summer league, but regardless, nonetheless, this is something that, this is a guy that I'm rooting for. I think this is a guy that actually could have a bright future in the NBA. He's a good athlete, and he can do quite a bit on the floor, so we'll see how it goes. Though I do believe the Celtics only have one roster spot open, and it's going to be tough for these guys to make the team because of this next move. Last move of the offseason that I want to talk about is one of my favorites. Lonnie Walker signs a training camp deal with the Boston Celtics. I do believe it is an Exhibit 10, so I could have kind of looped him in with the other two, but it would have felt unfair given Lonnie Walker's track record. This is not some undrafted free agent, no offense to Tristan Enaruna, and this is not somebody that, wasn't even on a team last year or anything like that, is just trying to prove himself. This is a guy who was the sixth man on an NBA team last year. This is a guy who was averaging about 10 points a game for the Brooklyn Nets. Obviously not a great NBA team, but still an NBA team. This is a guy that was coming off the bench and playing 20 minutes a night every single night for a NBA team last season. So this is not somebody that you could just outright look at and just loop in with a bunch of other guys that may not make the team. So Lonnie Walker is one of my favorite players in the NBA. This is somebody that I was hoping that the Boston Celtics would sign since he left San Antonio 2 years ago. I have been hoping, I have been praying, I have been begging, I have been pleading, I have been everything you could possibly think of that the Celtics would sign him and actually make him a part of the team, because I thought, given his skill set and his attitude, that he could be a guy that fits right in Boston, and that the Boston faithful, much like myself, will fall in love with instantly. And finally, 2 years in the making, he is signed. But he has not made the team yet. The Boston Celtics signed him to a non-guaranteed Exhibit 10 deal, which means he will have to go to training camp and he will have to make the team just like anybody else would. However, I would say he's got a pretty good advantage given he's actually a good NBA player. I mean, I will be heartbroken if he does not make the team, especially if he does not make the team over somebody that everybody and their mama knows is not nearly as good as Lonnie Walker. So I would say that it is Lonnie Walker's spot to lose, and if he does not make the team, then it will have to be because he got injured, or he just hates it in Boston and doesn't want to be there, or he's not willing to accept his role and fit into the kind of culture there. But I highly doubt that that's the case, because we could certainly use somebody like Lonnie Walker with all the long seasons that these guys have had, especially guys like Al Horford, especially guys like Tatum and Brown, who are playing big minutes each and every single night. You can slide Lonnie Walker into a starting lineup on a given night and give those guys rest down the road and feel great about it. You can rest Derek White and feel great about it. You can rest Drew Holiday and feel great about it. You can rest Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum or Al Horford and slide Lonnie Walker into that starting lineup, and you could feel great about it. If you're playing the Washington Wizards or the Charlotte Hornets or somebody that it doesn't really matter if you win or you lose, and who cares, there's 86 people in the stands, and you're on game 79 and it really doesn't matter if you win or lose at this point, you can just rest some guys. And Lonnie Walker is an important piece that can continue to score and put the ball in the basket during those games and during any other game. I mean, he is a guy that can come off the bench and obviously put the ball in the basket. 42% from the field is not super efficient, but 38% from three last year on 5 attempts a game is very efficient. So Lonnie Walker is a guy that can score. You can see him, I don't know if you guys have watched the videos of him training in the offseason. This guy is putting in work. He looks like he fits into Boston already. So I am so excited to see Lonnie Walker in a Celtics uniform, and I hope with every bone in my body that the Celtics don't waste that signing and somehow release Lonnie Walker in favor of, no offense, somebody like a Ron Harper Jr. or somebody that we just know is not better than Lonnie Walker. So that is it, guys. I loved each and every single one of those moves. I'm keeping them up here, or I guess up here. I don't know what side of the screen they're going to be on. They're probably going to be over here somewhere. So yeah. I loved all of these moves, and again, I'm just so excited to continue to watch the Boston Celtics be successful. I don't know if we're going to be as successful as we were last year. I got to be honest. I don't think we are, just because Kristaps Porzingis is going to be missing 2 months, and it's kind of hard for me to expect the Celtics to only lose 19 games for an entire season when you're going to have 25 games or so without one of your best players. But let's see what happens here. And again, what do you guys think of all of these moves that you could see? Again, I think they're going to be over here somewhere. Sorry, I'm holding the mic with the other hand up here. I had to kind of figure out which side I had to point to. But anyway, what do you guys think is your favorite move? What's your least favorite move? What did you like? What did you not like? Let me know in the comment section below. And right now, we are actually going to move on to something that I haven't really done in quite a long time, and I'm quite excited about it, and I hope you guys are too.